If you are trying to tap into a Toyota, Honda, Nissan fuel system, newer fuel system that uses these quick disconnect fittings, you're probably going to get a little frustrated because there doesn't seem to be anything in the standard rental fuel pressure test kit that you'll get from the auto parts store. And that's true because the Toyotas don't have a Schrader valve on the fuel rail. But if you just spend about $5 and get one of these guys here, or a few different sizes depending on the system that you're working on, and you just buy a 5/16 inch piece of hose here, like $1 a foot, you can get into that system, and it's actually pretty simple, and I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. The reason that you only need this connector right here is because this is what goes into that side with the yellow on it. So I'll show you. This is a similar size to that one there. They're actually so close that they're interchangeable. I'll get into the sizing in a second. But how this works is this here connects just like that. And these are called Bundy connections, or quick connect, quick disconnect fuel connections, or fuel fittings. And the way that you disconnect them, you'll see that with this shortly in the video when we hook the gauge in, is you squeeze the part that's got the little colored panel, and then that's gonna move these little hooks back past that flange right there, and then you can pull it out. The seal is actually done on this part of the pipe or tube by a couple O-rings. You can see a yellow O-ring in there. There's 2 O-rings in there. When you're squeezing this, you see how it's just moving that, and that's just to clear this flange. So by having just this one little piece, this one little magic piece on hand, you now have a way to tap into that yellow side. Now the sizing, I said earlier, there's a couple different sizes. If we look on here, I might be able to see it better on this one. See how it says there 7.89 and 7.95, and on this one it also says 7.89 and 7.95. That is a measurement in millimeters of the outside diameter of this part of the pipe. The reason that it's kind of an odd number is because it's the metric version of the SAE, or the American 5/16. So this is 5/16 of an inch. So like I said, when we disconnect that, it's going to look just like this, except this will be steel. That happens to be steel on the bottom. So here, it's not a problem getting a connection in there, because we can just use a 5/16 inch hose, right? So here's how we can build that on the bottom there with a 5/16 inch hose. Then we can put a T in here, which you can rent for free from the Auto Parts Zone. I'll get into that real shortly. We could put a T on here, right? This is where the fuel pressure gauge will go. And then we can just have this same thing. So this is just that's another one of the bottom side connector that I just showed you that I already have clamped into a hose. We can just stick that on there like that, and now we have a T that can get us into a quick connect. So that's what I will show you how to build here shortly over here on the bench, and you can rent the parts, like I said, for free, but you can't, the kits don't come with this, so you do have to buy this. I did want to show there are a couple other fittings though that you might decide what you might want to buy. This is the one you need. At the very least, you need something like this. This is kind of nice though, because you can see it's already at a T. So if you have your own fuel pressure gauge and you've just got a hose on the end, you can just buy this, hook your hose from your fuel pressure gauge on there, and then snap. So you can think about using a T if you'd like. We're going to use a fuel pressure gauge from the common kits that you can rent for free at the Auto Parts Zone. And so this has a Schrader valve style, so obviously that's not going to work on there. But I just wanted to show that in case that will work for you. The 90s are nice if you're in a tight space and you decide to use this instead of a hose onto the other side. You'll see what I mean when we get in there. But in the very least, you want to just make sure you get one of these. As I already mentioned, this is a 789/795. The other sizes that I've seen are the real small ones, which are the metric version of the 1/4" SAE. That's more for like motorcycles. So that's like 6 point something. I'll put it up on the screen. And then the larger size, which is for the 3/8 inside diameter, which is like 949, I think. So on the Toyotas, you're typically going to be able to get away with this, just this, the 795/789. Here's an example of typically what you'll end up with if you rent a fuel pressure test kit from the auto parts store. This is from Autozone, and it's OEM Tools 27167. Whenever you get the rental tools from the auto parts store, make sure all the parts are there. Like, it'll have a map like this, and just go through while you're at the counter and make sure that all the parts are there, because they come back missing parts a lot of times, unfortunately. So in this kit, the pieces that aren't going to do us any good is basically all these really nice brass Schrader valve and A&N style. We're not going to need any of those, but we will be able to use this here. This is the fuel little collector hose that goes there when we depressurize the system. You'll see that later. We need that. If you don't have a multimeter to check power at your pump, that's why they usually come with a multimeter. We won't need that to check fuel pressure though. We will need the pressure gauge, so we'll take the pressure gauge out. Okay. And we will need this T, and this is that's the piece that's really going to help us out here. Sometimes the kits come with these two little short pieces of hose. You might get lucky, and you might have a piece of hose in there that will fit, for example, this side of the Bundy that you end up buying. Okay, so this would be a good enough fit. And they also typically come with some hose clamps in the kit. They're usually back here, so you can use the hose clamps, and this looks like this would work here. But there's different sizes of these. For example, that one there you can see is a different size than that. This one looks like that one is a little, especially if I put them closer together, you can see this one's a little bigger than that. Either of those would happen to work in that hose, but that's just going to be you'll just have to see what kind of hose they happen to put in there. You will have to buy, though, while you're at the auto parts store, just buy a foot or two of this. This is the 5/16 inch inside diameter, and I won't focus on it, hose. Just ask them for 5/16 inside diameter fuel hose, and just get a foot or 2 feet of it. And this is what you'll use to fit onto so say this is the part on the car. That's what you'll use to slip over the part that remains on the car. And then you can always use one of the worm screw clamps that comes with the kit to tighten that off there. Now I'm giving you the 5/16 hose because on this video we're just talking about the standard size, which is the 789/795, but you'd need a 3/8 inch hose for the 949. So that's all we need from this kit. We can close this up and put this out of the way, and I'll show you the build on this. We're just going to take this T, this nice brass T that they have here, and this is where this goes, right? So that's why we wanted to grab this, because that's, oops, fuel pressure gauge there. And this is just what we're going to do to make our little T to fit in there. So on the one side, you'll have the 5/16 inch hose. You want to push it past that little flange there if you can to get a real good connection. And then on the other side is where we'll put the Bundy. There's what I mean with that 5/16 inside diameter hose. I just got it pushed on there, and I pushed it past that flange part there, just so I know I'll be able to get a nice seal in there. Now we'll use, in my case, this is going to be the 3/8 inside diameter, whatever it is on yours that this fits in, because this is going to be the side where you're going to have this fitting. So on this particular one that I got, it's the 7.89/795 on this end, and like somewhere around 3/8 on this end. So, but they do come with like 1/4 inch on this end. So just whatever hose will fit. Gotta really push that in there. So I'm gonna get that in there real well. I got that in there real well. And then if you're using Oerdeker clamps, this is when you would slip a couple of Oerdekers on there, or if you're using hose clamps, might as well slip them on. And then next step, we'll connect it like that. So I just used Oerdeker clamps here because I have some that fit real nicely on there. You could just use hose clamps. You just want to make sure that you've got a nice connection. So that's the two there going to the T. This will be the side that goes onto the tube, so that just stays as a hose. And then this is that side where you put the Bundy fitting in, and I just got another clamp there. Just want to make sure that you have a real good seal on here. I'm just going to check to make sure that I have good seals on both these. You don't have to do this, but it's kind of nice because you'll find out before fuel goes spraying everywhere that you have a good connection on there, or a bad connection if fuel goes spraying everywhere. So I'm just covering up both sides of those. The other end of this hose is just into there. Just use the vacuum pump to make sure that that is holding vacuum, which means it's sealed, so we're good. So that's it. That's the magic part that you just need to make with a little length of hose right here. That's 5/16 inch in this case. For most of the applications it will be 5/16, and then the 7.98 or the 7.95 fitting on this side. And now you can just use the standard thing that comes with the gauge. It's got this fitting on there. It's like an AN style fitting, and you screw it on here. Sometimes you do have to use a little Teflon tape, depending on how well this may or may not seal. I'll try it without any tape first, and then I'll just check it to make sure it holds pressure. So again, just like before, I'm going to put the vacuum gauge on here just to make sure that this is sealed okay at this connection here that we just added. Because like I said, sometimes you have to put some Teflon tape in there. So I'll just cover up the other side of this and make sure that we can hold vacuum across here. And we can get that to focus. Alright, so we're good. So here it is all put together. This is the fuel gauge that you want to make something like this, or if you have a T like the one I showed earlier, you can eliminate some of the hoses. So we use the Matrix here as our little test vehicle. We want to depressurize the system. You don't have to do this next step, but it makes it a lot cleaner, because if this system is pressurized, then when we disconnect, that fuel is going to go spraying everywhere. On the Matrix Corolla, the relay that we need to get to is back there. It's actually that one way in the back. You can kind of reach it from the back, but it's real difficult to remove. So I just like to disconnect the fuel pump. But on a lot of the newer Toyotas, it's the relay that you're looking for is not a fuel pump relay. It's a circuit open relay. Sometimes you even have a circuit open relay and a fuel pump relay. Removing the fuel pump relay, though, will not cut power to the fuel pump. You got to remove the circuit open relay typically. We're not going to remove that one because it's just too hard to reach. We'll just unplug the fuel pump for this test. On the Matrix Corolla, Camry, a bunch of other Toyotas, there's just a few fasteners, typically 14mm like this in the back seat, that hold the back seat down, right? So like there, and a couple other ones. And then you can just lift the back seat up, and you see I've just got it being held up with the seat belt here. And then you'll see something like this, and you'll have a few fasteners. These are 10mm or Phillips. We'll just remove those, and then that'll lift up, and this is the electrical coming through there, and we'll be able to disconnect it. With those fasteners out, you can just lift this up, and that there is our electrical for the fuel pump. This whole thing comes up. You can feel on the ledge on where it is on the bottom, and to get this out, you got to push this in. It's usually pretty hard, so you might have to use pliers, but try to do it by hand. Push it in and wiggle it up. There it is. Alright, see how it's really big? You're pushing in this right here. You're pushing that in right there, and it's just moving this little part there. Okay, so now the fuel pump is disconnected, so it's not going to get any power. And now when we start up the vehicle, if it will even start, we'll be able to use up whatever fuel happens to still be in the system. You can see, looking at the top of this here, this is the fuel pump module. That's the vapor line there. This is the only line out. There's no return. These are returnless fuel systems. So we'll use up whatever fuel is in here when we start up the vehicle, and then that'll largely depressurize the system and just make it a lot cleaner when we open it up. So now I'll go ahead and start her up, and she'll just run for a second and then die. Here we go. She isn't even gonna run, so you can see she's out of fuel pressure. Now we're back here. We'll go ahead and plug this in so we don't forget later when we do our fuel pressure test. Let's get this snap, make sure it snaps in. Okay. Back in the engine bay here, there's that yellow connector I showed earlier. Just going to clean it up a little bit before we disconnect it. So you just want to go around and get the dirt off of it and whatnot. That's cleaned up. Now you want to have some paper towels because there still will be a little bit of fuel in there. And we'll just disconnect this the same way as you saw earlier on the bench, which is just squeezing in both sides of these. So I'm just going to put these paper towels here because it's going to mostly leak down this way when we pull this up. So I'm going to squeeze in both sides and pull it up and hold the other side. A little tricky working around the camera doing this, but here we go. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this fuel line up so there's not so much fuel coming out of it. And I got a little container where I can dump it into. You can see the fuel level right there on that one. So you can see there's our disconnected fuel line, and if you look closely on here, you might be able to see the little marking there. See that, how that says 7.89? So we know that the 7.89 fitting will work in there. So I'll go ahead and put the one side in, and this is why I said earlier that you really only need this fitting part. This is really the only one you need, because you can put a hose over that one. That's what we'll do. Or you can put one of those fittings, but a hose is easier in my opinion. But this, to get in here, you need something that's going to fit in there like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and push this in until it clicks. Snap. Okay, it's there. And then the other side of the pressure gauge by the T, I figure out how to get this around and onto there. This is just the hose. I'm just, oops, sorry, 5/8 inside diameter hose. I'm just going to slip it right over there. And then I have a, I'm going to try to put my hand on the bottom of this because I don't want to stress this. Okay, so I got it down there. Then I just have a little hose clamp. Sorry, I'll move that hose in a second, but I got my hands full right now. Let's move this hose clamp down here. Right there, see? Okay, little hose clamp. Then I'm just going to tighten that up. Alright, just going to reach around all these obstacles and tighten this up here. Make sure that's pushed all the way down because you just don't want to have a leak. Alright, so that's good and tight. And now we are teed in. You can see now we got the gauge teed in. So here's the other end of the gauge. Got a whole bunch of hose, but we're just teed in right there. There's that other side. We're going to go through here. That fuel's going to head that way to the gauge. So it's going to be coming in that way to the gauge, here over to the fuel rail. So I'm going to put this up by the windshield so I can see it while we're in the vehicle, and we'll start her up, see what kind of fuel pressure we get. Okay, back inside the vehicle now. I'll start it. I'll go to the on position first. I don't think these systems prime. You can see they don't. These are the Toyota returnless systems. So here we go. Let's give her a start. Alright, there goes the fuel pressure building. And let's see where we go. Right where it needs to be. About, what's that, 47 or so? So this looks good. Alright, fuel pressure is holding steady. I'm going to turn it off. And the next check that we can do while we got that gauge on there is just to make sure that it's holding pressure. And the Toyota spec is you want to see at least 21 psi after 5 minutes. While you're waiting, come back in here and just make sure you don't have any fuel leaks. Or if you get like a weird value where your pressure gauge is kind of jumping, make sure that you don't have a fuel leak in here. Alright, so it's actually been like over 20 minutes because I had to charge the phone here. And as you can see, the pressure is holding steady, so there are no issues with the fuel system on this vehicle, which is what I was expecting. Alright, back under here, I have a container here and a length of hose, and on this particular gauge, you can put the hose, the little hose here. Don't press that button while you're putting it on. Just put that on there, and then when you press that button, you can depressurize it. Get that to focus. And watch the gauge. I'll press the button, and there you go. You can see the fuel coming out. So that just makes it a little less messy. Now that it's depressurized, we'll still have some fuel, but not so much. So now I'm going to go in here and disconnect this, and like I said, there'll still be a little bit of fuel, so you want to have some rags ready. And this will pull apart just the same way it did before, right? So we're going to push in on the yellow part. I'm going to hold it up a little bit, so there might be a little less fuel. I'll have this here in case there's some that comes out. Pressing in on those yellow ones and pulling this out. You can see it's moving. It's almost there. Okay, there's a little bit of fuel. When it comes all the way out is when the fuel is going to come out. So just be prepared. Okay. Alright, so that's what's in the gauge. Let me see if there's a little in this here, so I have less of a mess. A little there. Not too bad. Okay. Then the other side was the screwdriver on that little clamp. Just move the camera over here. You can see that's that little clamp over there. So you can get a better view, because I'll disconnect this and then we'll get the gauge out of here and reconnect. I'm just going to put this little container under here to catch the fuel. A little bit of fuel that'll come out of there. I already loosened the worm screw there. So I'll just pull this hose up. Just doing it slowly because I don't have another hand. I don't want this to go flying and fuel goes everywhere. Okay, it's almost off now. There it is. Okay, there's that little bit of fuel. So the gauge is now disconnected. We can get this out of here. Alright, so just took a look and made sure that these were both clean, and they are. So we can go ahead and reconnect this now. And, oops, looks like I'm going to have a little bit of fuel there. I might have to catch. Just put this back on until it snaps, just like before. Snap. Okay. Now I'll reach in there and give it a good tug to make sure it's on there all the way. Now when you give this a test tug, you'll notice it will move just a very tiny little bit if you pull real hard. You can see that tiny bit, maybe like eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch, not much. That's just that motion backing up against the flange. So all the way in, you've got the inside of this up against the flange, and then if you pull it back, you're hitting the hooks against the flange. So that's a good connection. Everything is buttoned up there, so now we'll turn the engine on and just double check to make sure there's no leaks. So no leaks, we're good. Now you can use that same kind of T connection on a number of any other vehicles that have this same kind of quick connector. It's especially nice to have that because sometimes the connections down by the fuel tank on like a van or a truck, they're that kind of style of the quick connect, and those are the ones that tend to have like no room in the engine bay. I'll show you on a van real quick. So for example, here's a 2GRFE 3.5 liter V6, and you can see that getting onto that fuel rail there, you can see there's the fuel rail there, and getting onto a connection, there's a lot of stuff in the way. But the good news is that on this vehicle, the connections close to the fuel tank on the underside are the quick connects, so you don't even have to mess with tapping into anything in this super tight engine bay area. You just disconnect the fuel line coming off of the tank, tap in right there, and check your pressure. Alright, not a whole lot of room in there, so I hope you can still see that. I'm going to be reaching in. There's still going to be some fuel pressure, so just be advised of that there'll be a little bit of fuel that will still come out, even though we mostly depressurized it. So you might want to have a container ready. Definitely have some towels, and we're just going to be pushing in on these little blue tabs on either side, and then pulling this back and then holding this the opposite way. So let's see what we can do here. Just pushing them in. And now it's moving back. So once it moves back all the way is when the fuel is going to come out. You can see not a whole lot, but definitely a little bit. So let's disconnect it now. Just going to wipe up this fuel. can see there. Alright, I got my fuel gauge set up with my special deal here with this 5/16 inside diameter hose. And that I'm just going to slip on to this one here. Should be a pretty nice fit. Okay, and it is. And I'll tighten down that worm screw a little later on the clamp here, so I'll leave that like that. And then the other end here is going to go in this side. So, oops, the fuel's still in there. Just going to push that right in, just like when we removed it. Make sure it's in there. Looks like that's in there well. Nope, it's not. Okay, try it again. There it goes. Alright, snap. Let me tighten this up. Okay, I don't want this heavy gauge here pulling down on this line, so I've got the bungee cord on the gauge to kind of hold some of the weight up so that this is free. Now I'll go ahead and try to start her up. Okay, you can see there we're at about 58 psi. I'm going to turn her off. Okay, so you can see that the pressure now is at 50. So the pressure was very high. It was almost 60, which is kind of a clue that it might be a regulator issue. Alright, so I hope this video was helpful for you and you can a little more quickly get into those quick connectors now. Just have a few of those fittings on hand and you'll be unstoppable. Thank you for watching and good luck with your repair.